our next speaker is Tom Moule. Are you here with us, Tom?
Yes, hi.
Hi again. Great to have us. Great to have you with us. Would you like to share your screen? Do you have any slides with you, or
absolutely,
otherwise?
Yes.
Great. You should be able to.
Fab. I'm just going to use this slot to give you an overview of JISC, the chatbot pilot that I was mentioning in the roundtable session. Give you an overview of what we're doing with this pilot and what our aims are, and then there should be quite a bit of time for questions afterwards as well. So for those who weren't at the roundtable session, I'll just recap briefly. So JISC is an organisation in the United Kingdom that works with almost all colleges and universities and supports them in the uses of technology. So that's anything from infrastructure and security to education technologies for teaching and learning. We're a non-for-profit organisation, have sort of roots in being a funding organisation, so very much sort of part of the infrastructure of the UK tertiary education system. I will explain a bit about the National Centre as I go along, so won't give away any spoilers just yet. So the pilot we're talking about now will involve 4 UK education colleges, so further education colleges are piloting a newly developed chatbot so that we can evaluate its performance with a view to potentially making this chatbot available to the whole sector, so the whole further education sector across the UK. The chatbot is a user-led question and answer style chatbot with one-to-one mapping between intents and responses. So in other words, it's not providing personalized feedback and personalized responses to individual students. It's replying based on the intention behind the question. There is one, the chatbot comes in its ability to find out what that intent was based on, student doesn't have to type in exactly the right words. When does the library open? To get questions with that intention, they could write, when does library open? When's the opening time for the library? And that's where the intelligent part comes in. And the chatbot is based on Bolton College's ADA, which is a pioneering chatbot that has been in use since 2017. And I thought, just to give you a sense of our motivation for why we were so keen to pilot this chatbot, here is a quote from former Education Secretary in the UK, Damien Hines, about ADA. So ADA is showing tech at its most transformative and enabling. And what we want to do with this chatbot is take something that's working really well in its current context in Bolton College and see whether this is something that can work across the board at different colleges throughout the UK. Why are we doing this? So fundamentally, because JISC has set up the National Centre for AI in Tertiary Education, and our aim at this centre is to accelerate the adoption of AI across the sector. And to achieve this aim, the centre is piloting a series of promising AI solutions. So the pilots may lead to JISC products and or to evaluations which will help JISC members decide which solutions are right for them. So we want to make sure that we're going in and looking at what works in terms of AI and education to help the sector to make those informed decisions about which technologies are going to suit their needs best. So we're working with the pilot colleges to make the chatbot accessible via their preferred medium. So some of the colleges might want the chatbot, for instance, to be available on the college website. With others, they'd prefer the virtual learning environment, so Moodle, for instance. And others are looking into and interested in the use of the chatbot via various apps, so Teams, for instance. So one of the key tasks for us as part of this pilot is to actually set the chatbot up in a way that it's going to work in the individual colleges' environments. A key part of the setup process, and these 2 bullet points here are where we are now in our journey towards this pilot. So colleges have been given a core question and answer set, and this is based on the one developed by Bolton College. And so because The answers, our assumption is the distance between different colleges in the UK setting, but the answers are going to be very different. So colleges are going to be writing their own answers to the question sets, and where they see gaps in terms of questions that they would like asked and they think their students would ask, they can add those in, and they can also take out questions as well. And we're hoping this will be quite a collaborative effort between the colleges involved on the pilots, so that we can work together to form some fairly comprehensive question and answer sets that we can say, well, these are likely to fit the needs of a significant portion of the sector. And this is one of the key tasks that we're doing at the moment, is building that question and answer set with the colleges. And another part of the pilot that's interesting, I'll mention a bit more in a moment, is that we're running a number of responsible design forums in order to address ethical questions in a participatory way. And when the chatbot goes live, which we hope will be in the next month or so, colleges will use this chatbot for 3 to 6 months, and then there'll be an evaluation of how effective the chatbot has been. So a few words on the responsible design forum that I mentioned. So the idea here is that we have a number of questions around the design of the chatbots that are I would say, ethically laden. And we touched upon those in the roundtable, touched upon some of those in the roundtable. So should the chatbot have a gender? How should the chatbot present itself in terms of its persona? And there are also questions around, well, how should the chatbot deal with sensitive issues? And these might be around mental health needs, around financial troubles, around social issues such as bullying that students might want to ask. And so a key question for us is, well, first of all, is the chatbot the right medium to address those questions? If the chatbot is being used to those questions, what responsibilities come with that, and how can it make good on those responsibilities? And so these are some of the key questions that we want to work with students and staff to answer as part of the Responsible Design Forum. And I've put there about it being a consensus-informed approach. So without answering these questions of an ethical nature, we're very strongly of the opinion that actually listening to people, getting their views is a really key way to cut through and get to answers there, rather than sort of, coming up with these with sort of ethical rules a priori, which I don't think in most cases work. I think you need to listen to people. So the second point there is that it's really key when you're listening to people to make sure that you've got a representative group of users. And so we tasked the colleges that are organising these with making sure that the students that do participate are representative of the wider student body in terms of age, in terms of what they're studying, in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of educational needs, type of student, in terms of the course they're studying or where they're at in terms of their educational journey. So really keen to get a range of views in as part of that participatory approach. The conclusions that we get from these will inform the design of the chatbot. We've been quite clear that they are there to inform rather than to dictate how the chatbot is made, but we are going to be, they will affect the design decisions such as around the interface, the persona, the gender, what kind of questions that the chatbot addresses. And one of the things that we'll be doing as part of the evaluation at the end of the pilot is to actually look at how well these decisions have fared. If we decide, for instance, that we want a non-gendered chatbot that doesn't have a human, there's nothing human to the interface, we want to get people's opinions on that and see how well it worked in practice to kind of make sure that we've got that wraparound evaluation. So listening to people in the first instance to get their ideas, but also listening to people about how well these things worked out in practice. In terms of the evaluation, which would be something that would be really interesting to share when it's done, just giving you an overview now of what we're evaluating and how. So key questions for that evaluation are going to be, is the chatbot effective supplying information as required by the user. Does it actually work? Is it effective? And then a sort of wider impact of the chatbot. A key question is, does the chatbot add value to the student experience? And there are a number of ways that we need to sort of break that down in terms of what it is that students value. Is it the immediacy of feedback? Is it the ability to ask questions in a way that might be judged less, for instance? And how much do they value that? How significant is that to them? And then a really big question for us is does the chatbot save staff time? And one of the things that we've heard as part of our initial discussions with the institutions that are piloting this chatbot with us is that a lot of time is spent by various staff services answering the same kind of questions over and over again. It's quite common for such services to be inundated, and to the point that they can't cope with the volume of student queries coming in at different points in the year, periodically. And we want to see whether the chatbot is helping and supporting them, and whether it is going to be effective at addressing issues around staff workload. In terms of the methods, we're going with a largely qualitative ways of looking at things. There'll be a number of surveys, interviews, focus groups with both staff and students to get the data that we need to answer those questions. And we'll be also analysing the usage data, which will give us a key indication, amongst other things, of the uptake and the engagement with the chatbot, which is also something that we want to get a clear idea of as part of the chatbot. So that's the end of my presentation. So hopefully there are a few questions there to go with it. And yes, happy to spend a bit of time answering anyone's questions.
Awesome,
okay.
Tom. Thank you very much. Actually, there is a question from Eric as well. Maybe if you can see it, otherwise I can read it to you. Is there any link between current JISC AI initiatives and previous JISC knowledge-based systems initiatives?
To my knowledge, there is not, but that is a question I can take away and see where there might be any kind of link in terms of how the thinking behind the latter has informed the former. Okay. I will take that away, and I'll let you know, Eric, if I find anything that will be useful there or interesting.
But is there a concrete plan to connect previous systems, knowledge systems, to the chatbot applications you're doing, or like immediate plans, or is this rather up for the future in another research?
No, so no, at the moment it's very much a focus on a QA chatbot, where the core question set is based on Bolton College's question set that they use for the ADA chatbot, but then developed sort of iteratively by the various different colleges, but no, not in terms of linking this up with that initiative.
Okay, interesting. Is there anyone else who has a question to Tom before we move on to the next session? No, perhaps not.
Sorry, I have one question.
Lars, go ahead.
We discussed, I'm wondering about the deployment of these questions and the knowledge bases, the type of Q&A that you're targeting here. Is it primarily student support type of questions, or is there any examples of subject specific questions?
Yeah, very good question. It's primarily student support services. So your kind of life on campus questions that students might ask. As you can imagine, you know, the question sets have been added to over the past few months with questions around COVID and measures in place and how students can address those. We're not at the moment looking at the teaching and learning side of things, but I'd definitely point you in the direction of looking at First Pass, which is another project that Bolton College have launched, which is taking that chatbot functionality and some of the ideas behind ADA, but applying it very much to a teaching and learning context, with a focus on feedback on student works and responses to students' subject-based questions and answers. So that's I'll see if I can find a good link to it. There may be to start you on your way. That there's a lot to look into there.
But that's outside the scope of this initial pilot with these
yes,
four
yeah, we're quite focused on this pilot. So there's a number of things that could go after this pilot. You know, we're interested in the question of personalization, for instance. We're interested in questions around chatbots that can have a sort of a different operational flow. So rather than it just being student asks question, chatbot gives an answer, actually ways that can feed back into student services so that people know what's been answered. That's a very interesting question as well. And we're keeping an eye on all these sort of other iterations that would be very interesting. But at the moment, really focus on that kind of that QA style. And that goes back to, I think, the initial, at the end of last at the roundtable, you asked about your sort of 5-year vision. And I think our focus is very much implementing, trying to see a sort of larger scale implementation of products that meet some kind of minimum specification, not just meeting it, but exceeding that specification. And then keep looking forward to, you know, well, what else? But we would like to see, the aim of the pilot is to really see whether this technology is ready to go and to be spread across the board. And then, yeah, we'll look forward to looking at further developments after that.
Exciting works there.
We have one more hand. Let's give it 1 or 2 more minutes for Nora to ask a question before we move on to our next session. Oh no, the hand is gone. Maybe not anymore. Okay. Here we go. You're allowed to talk now.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. It was a very interesting presentation, and I'm quite interested in whether you have a specific set of performance metrics that you are going to use to measure the level of engagement of students with the Q&A chatbot. I mean, quantitatively, I understand that they are going to feedback and you're going to run focus groups and collect qualitative data or results from educators, both educators and students. But you also mentioned that you are going to measure the level of engagement, possibly how long they spend the conversation, how long it's going to be. Have you got any clear, metrics that you are going to use that you have tried before and you think that it's reliable enough to measure the level of engagement with a chatbot? Thank you.
So not as such, no, because I think we've got a few hypotheses about what we would like to see, for instance, and we've got other examples of the usage data, which is I mean the key things are about the total volume of questions that you might expect to see, the number of back and forth interactions that you might expect to see. That seems to be a healthy indicator. The number of repeat questions, and we can have sort of hypotheses about this and say, well, if a chatbot is working and a chatbot is effective at doing its job, then obviously we would see 10% of students asking at least one question per day, or we might see for an engaged user would have a number of back and forth interactions that might have a sort of a rally, if you like, of 6 question and answer sets, or 3 rather, to 6 in total, 3 question and answer pairs. But I think it's quite difficult for us to know whether that is a reliable proxy for whether it's effective or not, because it might be, for instance, that a student just wants to get a really critical bit of information from a chatbot once every 2 weeks, once every, maybe twice a month, maybe 3 times every 2 months, maybe even once a month. But if that chatbot is being able to give them information at a time that they wanted it, so it might be, for instance, all the college services are closed, they want to get a key piece of information at 7 o'clock at night that answers a question that allows them to move forward with some process or make a decision that's important to them, then that might be a very effective use of that chatbot. So I think may have sort of gone a bit of around the reek in there in answering your question, but it's difficult for us at this stage without talking to students about what it is they value in the chatbot usage to say what exactly is a useful what exactly is a useful interaction. What we're hoping to do is that we can get some insight from those qualitative interactions, and then actually use the usage data to corroborate that, so it's slightly firmer in terms of that evidence base that we have for its efficacy, if that makes sense. But I mean, that's our kind of the framework that we're working under at the moment. But yeah, very keen to. I'm sure there's lots of people with lots of expertise here that will have different approaches, and I'm very keen to hear.
May I interrupt and cut you a little bit short here because we are running out of time. I appreciate your answer. Thank you very much. I think it was worthwhile having the question and the answer as well. So I appreciate your talk and also answering the question. I think there's one more raised hand from Veronique. We won't have time for that, but perhaps Veronique, you could write it in the Q&A, and Tom, if you have some more time, we would love to if you could answer that directly so everybody can profit from your answer here.